Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's episode, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Litmaps. Litmaps is a research visualization tool. So primarily you can use it in a way that you input a paper that you're interested in, so a title or a link, and then it will output this beautiful map of papers of how they relate to each other through citations. So who is citing which paper and how many times and through ages and so on. I have figured out how to use Litmaps in many different ways. So one interesting one was if you're looking for a potential supervisor for your PhD or postdoc and they have a lot of papers, you can adjust this map in a way that you can see and visualize which topics they keep working on, which are the most relevant topics. So there's a tutorial for that in a link in the description if you want to take a look at that. And if you want to use Litmaps, if you use the link below and choose to use the premium option, which you don't have to, the free one is really cool enough, you get 30% off. That's it. Love you all. Let's get on with this episode.
All right, we are recording. Everybody, welcome to the 5th episode of the Better Biologist podcast. Today I'm speaking with Isabelle Kohler, who is a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. She is currently holding a position of an assistant professor at the VU Amsterdam University and at the Division of Bioanalytical Chemistry. And as of recently, she is a founder of NextMinds, which is a company which aims to provide tools and knowledge for early career scientists, such as myself, to thrive in academia. Isabelle, welcome. I'm honored and privileged to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. Tell me a little bit more about your background. How did you come to do science, and especially pharmaceutical science? Tell me about your road all the way from, let's say, PhD to today.
Thanks. Well, thanks also for having me here. It's very nice to have the opportunity to talk a bit about everything that we're going to talk. So initially, I'm a pharmacist. So I studied pharmacy at the University of Geneva, initially University of Lausanne, and then I moved to the University of Geneva. I did 5 years, and what I wanted was to work in a pharmacy. But then I realized at the end of my studies that actually that was not really something as exciting that I thought. So spending roughly 40 years of my life being in a pharmacy was not something that I thought like it's going to be for me. And then I thought maybe that's, I need something else. So I looked for a PhD, and I ended up again in Geneva to do my PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, as you said. So I focused mostly on analytical chemistry, which is basically to measure or develop methods that aim to measure something in the body, for instance. And then at the end of my PhD, like I think many PhD students, I didn't really know what to do, so I didn't know which direction to go. But I thought I liked the idea of going abroad to do a postdoc, and not really knowing why I would do a postdoc, but mostly to just like leave the country and then discover something new. So I moved to the Netherlands, which was one of the, I think, the best places for me in terms of network, because I already knew some of the institutes here in the Netherlands, and also topics because they were quite strong and still strong in my field of expertise. So then I did 2 years and a half roughly of a postdoc. And then came another moment where I thought, where do I go? Because it's, I think, very often a moment in the career of people who do a PhD and a postdoc where you don't exactly know in which direction you want to go. And then, so I applied to many positions, not a lot worked out, let's say, until one where basically I ended up at the university in Leiden as an assistant professor. Which was quite a good moment in my life, because I thought, like, yeah, I'm there. I'm at the assistant professor level. I spent 4 years at the Leiden University, and then I realized that I needed to go towards a bit slightly different university and type also of group and research, and that's when I changed for the VU Amsterdam, or the VU Amsterdam, as we say, in 2020, so 4 years ago. I'm still working there. I'm really enjoying it. But then I also thought at some point, the traditional career of like working like crazy, like, I don't know, 70 hours a week, to write grants and publish papers and things like that. I mean, that's cool, but I'm not a person who can do that. But I really like academia, but I felt like there's something else that I would like to do, that would be like really my own, and where I can even help better people, especially students and PhD students. So my work in academia is really nice in terms of teaching. I really like that. So I thought I need something where I can like encourage them even more, like by bringing them more skills, not only the scientific skills that we teach like on a daily basis, but just like other skills to help them navigate through academia and after academia. And that's where I decided roughly a year ago that it was time to like set up my own company. So I set up my own company that is called NextMinds last year in July, and now I'm trying to do still working mostly for the VU and trying to do also this work as a business.
How was this process of starting a company while being a professor? Was it a long process to do it? Did you need to get a lot of confirmations and a lot of approvals from your academic supervisors or whoever is around you, the boards?
So I'm certain that this is what I really have to do, my mission. But then, so the thing is, of course, if you have a startup and then you still want to work for academia, you need to discuss that with people, because you can't just like do that. It's not, you have to like make it official, and you have to have also the university accepting that. And I had some discussions with my boss. I have a wonderful boss who is really, really supportive. So I think that helps a lot. And well, he said, we're going to help you giving space for this type of activity, because I think they understood that it was good to keep me happy, let's say, and that maybe that was also something like special that they could see also, that it can be also useful for the university, because of course what I'm doing is also useful for my own university. So we discussed that with my boss and the higher management as well, and we agreed depending on, so each university has their own policy, each faculty even has their own policy, so I had to discuss with them to see what was allowed based on their policies, what I wanted, and what would also fit, of course, the group and the department in which I am, so that everyone would be happy. And I think so far it works. And it has just started, so I don't know exactly in which direction it will go, but I think I'm in a good place now to have that. But it has been quite also sometimes a mental roller coaster, thinking like, yeah, is that gonna work? Which direction do I go? Will I need to maybe leave fully academia? But I don't want that, because that doesn't make sense, to provide help for people in academia if I'm not myself in academia, because I think that's what is strong here, is that I'm in academia and I provide help for these people. So yeah, it is still to see like what's how do I give space to everything is still a bit of a challenge, but it's also a nice moment, I think.
Cool. I'm very happy that it went successfully and that you're starting out. So anybody who wants to reach out to you can do so mostly on LinkedIn, where you post a lot of cool posts. Mostly, I like the format of your posts that are usually in the form of a question that a student or someone early in the career is asking you, and then you respond. So I find that quite cool. So you got this idea to mentor young scientists. Take me back to the time when you were, at the start of your PhD, let's say, journey, and some obstacles you were going through, and which I guess in the end was the ultimate inspiration for helping people at that stage. So tell me, what were you going through? How was your PhD journey? What are some challenges you encountered?
Well, that's funny, because you say, so that's true. I start my post with a question, but actually it's a question that not a student would ask, but I would ask like 15 years ago, when I had no idea what I was doing. So I think so I come from a family where no one studied, so no one went further than high school. So I was the first one to go to university, and then like doing a PhD, like no one has an idea around me. So I didn't have any friends who were going through the same process. So it was very new for me. Even the word PhD was very new. So one of the anecdotes that I still find funny is that when I was preparing my Outlook a signature for my emails, I put like Isabelle Kohler, PhD. And then at the beginning of my PhD, and then one of my colleagues said, "But you're not a PhD." And I was like, "Of course I'm a PhD, because in the contract it says like PhD." She was like, "No, you're like a PhD student. You're gonna be a PhD like at the moment you get your PhD." And I was like, smart. Okay, see that's where I come from. Like no idea about that. So
Yeah.
it's like really starting in. I think that was now it's fun to think about that. But then when I started, I was like, I had no idea about. I knew I would do research. I knew the lab where I was because this was the lab where I basically studied. So I knew my supervisor had been my teachers. I knew them. I knew we had like really good contact. So that was really great. But I didn't, like many things, I didn't know that it would be so, I think, so hard. So for instance, I was working with an instrument that was really, really challenging in the way that it would not give you the results that you wanted. So then it took me like for instance, my first paper has been rejected on the day of my birthday. Like you're like, yeah, nice, really. I mean, now I'm laughing, but of course I was like crying on that day that it happened. But then it took like, I think 2 or 3 years to get my first paper out, like good paper, because that's the time that it took to really get results that could be published. And I remember that I was not, one of the challenges was that I was not understanding why I couldn't get these results. So I had the feeling that I was really, like, all the theory was crystal clear. I could like build this instrument even myself because I knew everything that was in there, but it was still not giving me the results that it was supposed to give me. And still now, sometimes I don't know why it gave me the results that I was expecting, and for a few weeks it did not. And this, I found it very challenging, that even if you work hard, even if you spend hours, days, weeks, everything on something, like thinking like, I'm gonna get that, you will, but then it really costs you a lot of time and luck. And so, yes, I think sometimes it's also luck. So this I found difficult. And what I also, now that I'm saying that, what I also found difficult was that I had other people also working in a kind of similar, well, with the same instrument, with a different application. And they were quite successful. And I was there not being successful, but working with the same instrument, except that the application was different. And then I found that very hard also to deal with, not competition, because we were friends, we're still friends. So it's not competition, but like the feeling that you're still working hard, but you don't get what you should deserve because you're working hard. But then others are working also hard and they get what they expect and what they want. That you're a bit like, I didn't really like that. And I think that was like the first, 2-3 years were quite difficult in this respect, because that's not something that I had expected to work hard, but then not see something coming out of that. That's like
Usually you
super
have this clear
frustrating, right?
connection. You work hard and you should see some success, right?
Exactly. And like not 3 years later, I mean, when you're like 23, 24, that you know, like 3 years later, it feels like another generation, you don't have this patience. And I think like that for me, that was like already didn't have patience, but I think for young scientists now it's even worse. So that's what I see also a lot with PhD students. When, for instance, in the Netherlands, we say usually you need 4 papers to finish in 4 years, which is the time of the contract. So of course you say 4 papers, 4 years. What will they think?
Total.
Yeah, but they say like, oh, but it's 1 paper per year. And then I'm like, no, don't think like that, because the first year you're really lucky if you get 1 paper, and usually you have done your master internship in the same place already in the same topic, and it's more like you really, it's an exponential curve. So you would have nothing in the first 2 years in terms of tangible output, but you really get stuff, like you get skills, you get data and everything, and then you start really like piling up the knowledge and everything. But I had also no idea these kind of things, because no one told me, because I did not have like any network or family or friends that were in this field. So then you discover that, like step by step, and it could, it was quite frustrating, I would say.
How were you dealing with it at the time? Was it just feeling bad all the time, telling yourself bad stories, and but in the end you made it, so somehow you survived it. What were the strategies to survive it?
Yeah, I think that's funny. I say very often, and I see that also in PhD students. So I did 5 years, almost 5 years for my PhD, because it was between 3 and 5 years in Switzerland. And I always say that the first year is a kind of honeymoon period, because you're like so happy you got a PhD, you're happy to discover things and everything. Then usually you start to decrease in terms of like not happy because things don't work as you planned. Then you're really deep, and then I think in the middle you're like, no, but I think I'm gonna make it. Like I will keep working hard, and then you start to see a bit of output. Maybe some conferences, you go and talk to people, you realize like for everyone it's the same, and then you get out of it. And that's also how it worked for me. And I think what saved me was, so I had really cool office mates. So we were 4 in the office, and we were all having moments, like really down moments, just in also in life, that you lose someone in your life, or you have like a breakup or something, and you have issues with your instrument. So we had really a strong connection, which helped, like just laughing and crying together. That was really helpful. And I think what helped me was also to meet people from different labs in different countries, and to also go. So with the instrument that I was working with, I could visit them in Germany, at their headquarters, to do some demo with whatever new instruments they had. And then I had the chance to discuss my problems with them there. And then I exposed all the problems that I had. And they were like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's actually a thing in the instrument that doesn't work. So that's what you should do. You should like reset 3 times the instrument, and then it's going to work. And I was like, so I'm not stupid. What you're saying is like the instrument itself is stupid. And it took like months to get this answer. And I think that was a moment, but it was quite late. I think it was like year 3 that I thought, so that's the problem of the instrument. Thanks for confirming that. So I think talking to people was what helped me to like stay sane. So you had moments you were just crying, but I think that's part of the game. And other moments that it was like, yeah, I will make it, because everyone went through the same phases. So why shouldn't I make it as well? That's gonna work.
I relate to that issue, and I guess that confirmation you got from other people who told you, hey, this is not you, it's the instrument. I think I tend to, well, I'm in my first year of PhD, and what I've noticed in myself as a character is that when something seems not to be working, I tend to not ask anyone about it, because I want to solve it myself, but then it's not working, and I'm slowly getting isolated from everyone else, because now I'm in my head all the time trying to solve this problem.
Yeah.
In your case, it was this instrument, like, why is this not working? But in my case, it was something else, some other experiment or whatever model system I was using. And for some reason, I just can't. And at some point, I'm like, maybe I should talk to someone who has expertise working with this exact same thing. Maybe it's not so bad to be humble and admit that I'm just stuck here. And then I talked to a postdoc who worked with the same thing for years, and he solved it in 2 minutes. Like, I had the same problem. You should have asked immediately. So I think that's a very actionable tip. Don't go
Did
too
you take
deep.
that as a take-home message? Like, are you gonna ask now earlier, or?
Oh, definitely. I'm trying. I mean, I can still feel the tendency in myself when something's not working, because you start immediately, the self-talk starts, none of this is going to work. Now, if this experiment doesn't work, then that puts into question all other experiments. Is it all because I don't have enough expertise? I shouldn't be here. Maybe all of these other people deserve to be here, or maybe I don't. And then I try to cut it and go to to someone else who knows more about the thing, and talk about it. But yeah, it's a tough thing to accept on a daily basis, to be humble and ask questions.
And I think that because also, the people who do a PhD, they have like same characteristics, not everything, of course, but it's like people who are really perfectionistic, like they really want to strive only for perfection. And usually they are quite also driven and ambitious and independent, they want to really like own their own thing, like really discover themselves things. And I think that makes it also more difficult to like admit, like actually it's even not admit, it's just realize, like, by the way, wouldn't it be better if you share that with someone else and you ask, hey, what do you think? Even not an expert, but just like ask your colleague, like, what do you think? This is the problem I have. And then they're gonna say something like stupid maybe for them, and then you're like, whoa, this is exactly what I needed. So yeah, but I understand why we're making that, because it's not also, you also, the problem with PhD students project is that most of the time, I would say if you're in one group, you're the only one working on that specific part of the project. Sometimes if you have like big consortia, you may have 2 PhD students per group, but that's pretty rare. And then they are like on 2 different topics. So basically you're the only one on your topic. So you're quite isolated doing your own research. So then it doesn't help also because you don't see around you people doing the same than you do. Maybe in different labs, and then you're not going to write an email and saying like, hey, you managed to publish that. Can you please help me because I can't reproduce that in my lab? No one is going to do that. So I think that doesn't help also, like the system in itself, the way that it's built, it doesn't encourage this kind of behavior, like you just said.
I think another element to this tendency is the way because there's a certain selectivity for PhD programs, and those are usually people who got really good grades in the beginning of their school and then continued getting good grades and being praised for being the one who solves things and who is the best in class or whatever for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, when you face a problem that is in the moment unsolvable or unsolvable to you, it's kind of a mini identity crisis. Like, am I really now the person who solves problems?
Yeah.
So I think maybe the root of the problem is the way people just, this feedback loop you get as you're growing up and getting grades and everybody's praising you. And then all of a sudden grades don't matter anymore. What matters now is, can you survive? Can you keep going? Can you keep solving that problem? Can you connect with other people? All of these little factors. But grades definitely don't have, if you had an A in some subject, that has no relevance on whether you'll be solving this problem successfully. Okay, so at some point you said you go to a postdoc. You didn't really know what to do. It was another transition point for you, but you knew you wanted to do research and you wanted to discover something cool and maybe go later for a professorship. How was your postdoc? How was it different to a PhD journey?
Well, I never wanted to be a professor, and I still don't want to be a professor, but it's so it's not, for me, it's not a dream. So that's not something that I have like in the end goal. For me, it's more like, so my strategy was I'm interested in so many things that I want to keep all the doors open in case of at some point I choose for one direction, that I have this door that is open. So that's also why I thought, let's do a postdoc, because if at some point I want to still stay in academia, then I will need this postdoc, and anyway, it's going to be good. So what I like, postdoc was, I really liked it. For me, it was like a really great period in my life. So it was first like going to another country. That was like, so for me, like I grew up in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and I spent 1 year in Zurich to work during my studies in a pharmacy. But that was the only kind of different environment that I had, with a different language, but still in Switzerland, So I thought like I need to see something else, and this was already good just to go abroad and be confronted to something else, a different culture. What I liked as well is that, so I had my own money because I got a grant from the Swiss National Science Foundation to go there. So it means having my own money means also that I was really free. So I had basically like, I was free because I was not paid by anyone except by my own grant. So I had the money on my bank account, and I could do basically what I wanted, which is really nice when you have this freedom. I was in a really nice group also it was in a hospital center, a medical center, sorry. So it was also very applied, and I'm someone who likes applied chemistry. So I really enjoyed there, meeting new people and doing new type of research, expanding the expertise that I had at some point, but like applying that to different topics, which was really nice. And it was nice because since you already have your PhD, you feel like less pressure in some way to prove yourself. So you have already the paper, so you don't feel like the diploma. So you don't really feel like every day like, oh, I'm an imposter. Like, no, this time you had the paper already. But the thing that I found a bit more challenging was that, so in terms of project itself, it was a really good project, but it didn't work very well because of factors that were independent of myself. So for instance, I was working, so I'm the one analyzing samples, so I need other people to provide me with samples. and I needed samples from mice. And the experiments were supposed to be done by one person who was expert in this type of experiments. But the person got pregnant like a few weeks after I arrived. So you can imagine being pregnant means you're not allowed to be in the lab anymore, especially for this type of experiments. So you're a bit screwed, like when your samples that you rely on these samples, but then you can't get them for like a year. You're a bit like, ooh, I need to find like something, different type of project and everything. Which also means then that I did not publish a lot. And that was something that then didn't help for my future career, because I didn't publish a lot during my PhD because things were not working. And then I also didn't publish a lot during my postdoc because science was also, well, for some factors, was not working in the way that it was supposed to be. And that I think didn't help for the moment that I started to apply to grants for the next steps, because one of the comments that I always got was like, yeah, cool, but you don't have like a million papers like you should have at this stage of your career.
Sorry, can I jump in there?
Yeah.
I wanted to. It's an interesting catching point, interesting anchor. You mentioned how publishing a lot of papers was kind of viewed positively, right? When you're applying for a grant. And then I'm thinking, the fields are different. They take different amounts of time to produce a paper. In biology, it can take a couple of years to get a solid paper if you're getting into a mechanism. I have colleagues who worked on one paper for 10 years to make it complete. That was a long postdoc, which we can talk about long postdocs as well. So I just want to ask you, what is your opinion on this general view, if it is held indeed by these committee members who are accepting grants, to take the view that you should have a lot of papers published? Would it be okay if you had 2 papers but they were really good, or does the number just prevail of publications?
You raise a very good point, and I have like different answer from different aspects. So in my field, analytical chemistry is difficult to get. So you can get papers, but then the impact factor is gonna be like 6 or 7 at max when you develop a new method or a new tool, let's say. If you want to go through like Nature and everything, then you have to be associated with medical applications or anything, and then you're in the middle, the one bringing the coffee, and that it doesn't help like work. I think in my network, maybe you have 1% who published in Nature. That's a random number, but you see a bit the point. So it's difficult to go for like high impact factor in our field. So we stick a bit more to this type of lower impact, but still very important in our field. So to answer your question, I think I see 2 aspects. So when I started applying to more grants, and especially I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I applied to national grants in the Netherlands, which was a bit, so that was for people who had their PhD between 3 and 8 years ago. So it's like what you call not early career, but like mid-stage, let's say. Not fully experienced, but mid-stage. And they had just changed the rules, meaning that in the CV that you had to write, you were not allowed to write everything anymore in terms of all your publication, but you had to select the 10 best outputs, not publication outputs, that you thought were the most adequate to highlight your excellence. And that's why they call a narrative CV. And they really, I think they started that year or the year before. And what they wanted was that they wanted to like level a bit people, so that if you're in a field where it's easy to publish a lot of papers, then okay, you're fine anyway. But then if you're a field where it takes a bit longer to publish a paper, or it's just like more difficult or whatever, then you can still sell that in a different way. And for me, like a lot of people complained because they were like, yeah, but then we cannot really show everything that we did. But for me, that was really nice, because of course I was like, well, that's the moment that I can profile myself, having like not a lot of papers, but then I can sell that differently. And then I could also not only sell papers, but then also some other output that I did in terms of communication, like articles in journals, these kind of things, in a magazine, sorry. That also showed that I was also good at disseminating science, which maybe other scientists are less interested in. So I did see, I don't know, they wanted to make an evaluation, but I haven't read what people think about that. But I see a bit of a trend towards valorizing the work differently so that we don't only focus on the quantity of papers. They also said, for instance, in the grant proposal, you were not allowed, so really not allowed to use any index or any metrics that would refer to an age index or number of citations or number of papers. You were not allowed to say that. You had to really select the best 10 papers or outputs based on what you think are the best. So I find that very interesting because I think you see a trend, but at the same time, we still like push towards publication. So for instance, I see also for PhD students, one of the first questions they're going to have when they start a PhD is, how many papers do I need to publish? And I'm sure you ask that at some point, or you have that in mind that you're like, I'm not going to manage to defend my thesis as long as I have not published XX papers. And this is also something that in the Netherlands, everyone thinks like, oh, that's written somewhere, like in the rule somewhere of the university. But actually, it's not. What is not to my knowledge, it's more like the PI decides what is considered enough, and then you are allowed to defend your thesis based on the quality, overall quality. So it's a bit a kind of dual message, I think, because you still hear like this publish or perish, I think is still valid for many cases, but you do see some changes also with what is happening with AI right now and some decreased quality of some of the papers that we see online,
to say
right?
the least.
Exactly. So I think there are some changes and stuff is happening like over the last, I think, 5 years that's changing a bit. Yeah.
I think it's a very important point. You mentioned that it's a dual message. So there is, in some places, I guess, a trend to try to evaluate things differently, recognizing that the number of publications is not everything. But then if you just take a look at the roots of the problem, it's just that the whole incentive structure is a little bit pushing into the direction of number of publications. So it's kind of very difficult to resist. And I found it very interesting. Recently, I read a news article. Well, I skimmed over it, but I've read that University of Zurich in Switzerland has withdrawn themselves from the rankings.
Yeah.
Given that these university ranking systems are ranking, well, mostly according to citations and numbers of publications. So they want to kind of, I guess, break that trend. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't read, I only read the title, so I cannot like speculate on what is the content of the article, but I thought like, oh, that's nice that Zurich in Switzerland is doing that. I'm quite happy. Yeah, these rankings, you know, I also, so I understand the point, and I think it's quite brave to take this decision because they basically exclude themselves from a ranking where they could get more applicants because a lot of people are applying to the top ranked universities. And I think maybe, but I think for them it's not a problem because they anyway have enough applications. So I think it's not a problem. But yeah, this ranking stuff, I really dislike that because it's just using metrics that if you're looking for a PhD and you choose a university and a host institute based on ranking, this is something I really dislike, and I don't encourage people to do that because you have like millions of other aspects that you should first focus on to ensure that you're going to have an enjoyable PhD or that you're going to even survive through your PhD. And I think the number of papers that come out of a lab, I mean, it's great if they do great research, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be a great host institute or a nice environment for a PhD. So I think the ranking, like, be my guest. I don't like them, but I think if people want to have ranking, that's nice for them. But choosing, for instance, a PhD based on this ranking, this is something that I do not encourage to do.
Another thing where people choose labs is not just institutions based on ranking, but students, when they approach me on LinkedIn, they talk about this professor has H index of 200 or whatever. But I was in labs where I was in many labs. So when I think about it, I've changed quite a few labs during my bachelor's and then master's because it was a lot of traveling, first year, second year. But you encounter labs and you talk to these people and you see professors who have a very high citation number, and they publish 50 papers a year. But then when you talk to them about those papers, they have no idea what's going on in those papers because they're mostly, they made a career early and now they're collaborating with just, they're saying yes to everything because they know this is playing the system, it's going good. I get another paper, I get another couple of citations, maybe I cite a little bit of my own work from before, and stuff keeps piling. The grant evaluations keep coming, positively evaluated because I have these numbers that are amazing. But then you take a closer look and they have no idea what's going on. So definitely, as you said, choosing an institution based on rankings, I would compare that to choosing a lab based on just citations. But I think this is where we enter into the field of your expertise, and especially with what you're doing with NextMinds, with your company, and where you help students. You said there are many aspects other than institutional rankings. What are these other aspects that we should evaluate as students to choose a lab, choose a university?
So you mean now someone who is interested in doing a PhD, like what they should consider?
Yeah.
Let's say. Yeah, I think so. That you gave a good example with the PI who has like a lot of papers. So I think when you say to students, so pre-PhD, let's say bachelor and master students, undergrad students, when you tell them like, oh, you want to do a PhD, why do you want to do a PhD? And I always like to ask these questions because I had no idea why I wanted to do a PhD. Besides, you want to do research, right? That's what everyone will tell you. I want to do research. They really like that. So they're like, I want to do research because they know a PhD is about research. So the thing that is difficult is that it's not only about research, it's about a million other things. But if you choose your PhD position or host lab based on the research only, it doesn't mean that it's gonna make you happy. Because I think so a PhD is indeed related to the content of the research. So you need to find something that you're really excited about, because otherwise if you're doing a PhD in something that you find not interesting, then it's just gonna suck, of course. But you need to be a bit flexible in that, because I think what is really more important than that is what is the environment that you're gonna get. So when I say environment is A, who is the group leader? So who is the PI? B, who is gonna supervise you? Because if that's, for instance, a big group where they have 50 PhD students, of course, the PI is just lost in other things like writing grants. So they're not gonna manage to supervise the 50 PhD students, but they may have like assistant professors, postdocs, support, everything that can really also help managing these PhD students or supervising them. So this is something that you need to check. Or if you're in a small group, is the PI available to also be present, for instance, in the lab to really, if you're doing a PhD in the lab or next to a computer to help you, really like understanding what you're doing. And also like the environment itself. So what are the, for instance, if you need to work, if you do experiments in the lab, what is the lab offering? Like, will you get one super fancy instrument, but then you're 20 who need to work with this super fancy instrument, and the fancy instrument is going to be broken like every 2 months, because that's what happens. We see that still with our instrument.
And you need to restart it 3 times.
No, you need to like pay like so much and wait until the engineer comes. That's even worse than that. So you see, my instrument was very old. That was good, because you could restart it without like being afraid that it would break down. And I was sharing it with only one person. I was super lucky. But then, yeah, are you gonna work with like the super nice instrument, but then you're like have to share it with 20 other people, and it's gonna be hell because you never get time. When you have time, the system is broken. These kind of things, or you're sick or whatever. Instrument, yeah, the lab and the lab colleagues. Like, what is the culture? So is that a place where you can like laugh with your colleagues, or is that gonna be very competitive and then you're like the only one and people want to just steal your results and things like that? Like, I read horrible stories in the US of people who were just, it's like so competitive that you have people like really like going, for instance, to the freezer to like exchange samples to just make sure that their colleagues would not get results, and that then it end up being like a mess. And when I was super lucky, like in Switzerland, that was really nice, the environment. Like supervisor were great, my office mates were great. Like instrument, we had like, they were not that recent. They were like 10 to 15 years old, which is old for this type of instruments. But you had access to like different kind of instrument. That was really cool. And then you hear these kind of stories, and I'm like, my God, that exists. So like, if you're looking for a PhD position, the problem is that it's information that is difficult to get. So you can't write to the PI and say, hi.
Or are you a psycho?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are you micromanaging people, and is your lab a toxic lab? You can't really say that, because I think toxic labs, like, they don't realize that their lab is toxic. That's part of the business, right? And you can't approach people a bit like, for instance, on LinkedIn. That's what I advise usually, to try to make contact with people who are close or who know these people, and then to like have an informal conversation to see if it fits. So that's the major thing, if it fits your personality. Because if someone, I can't handle toxic labs, or people who are like destroying me. It's not part of my well-being, let's say. So I would run away from that. But if you're someone who just like, I don't care, work is work, I'm just gonna do it, and whatever people say, I'm okay with that, then all good. Like, everyone can find a position, I think, that fits to them. But I think this is really something that, next to the research, like really to spend time a bit to have a look what is happening in the lab, and especially if you get an interview, or a second interview, because usually now the first interview is via Zoom if that's someone from abroad. But if you have the chance to get a second interview, that would mean you're in the last 2 or 3 candidates. Then like ask to visit the lab, and to have coffee with some people, and dare to ask questions like, how is it to actually do your PhD in this environment? These kind of questions. I think that can be really life-changing.
For me, I had the chance to choose a lab a couple of times so far. And every time I was faced with the same question. As you said, it's information that is not necessarily, hard, but it's hard to get.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to, even if you talk to the lab members, you have to be really careful not to make them say something they don't want to say, because they also don't want to be in a position where they are talking bad about their own environment. So it's hard to navigate. But so far, for me, what's been a game changer was LinkedIn, and trying to talk to, you don't have to talk directly about, is your professor a psycho and should I come there? But you can kind of package it as questions that get the atmosphere out. Like, you can kind of get the picture how their daily life looks like without being so direct. Like asking, do you guys collaborate between each other sometimes? Stuff like that, And is the professor mostly present with you? And how often do you have lab meetings? Things like that, that indirectly can tell you, if you have a lab meeting every 3 months, maybe that's not managed enough. And if you have a meeting every 3 days and everybody has to report all the time, that's maybe a little too much. So LinkedIn was a game changer for me. And I usually try to talk to people who are now in the lab, but also 1 or 2 people who left the lab before.
Yep.
So I think that's a good,
especially
good thing to think about.
The second category will be very likely a bit more open, because if they left, I think it's like less strings attached. So maybe they will be more honest and transparent, I think, with what they have experienced.
Yeah, you then definitely have to do a little bit of averaging of biases. So maybe the current member might be a little bit more biased to the negative emotions if they're experiencing something negative. And then someone who just left is now just letting it loose and saying negative stuff for maybe no reason, right?
But also in what you say, because you label that negative, what I really also want to highlight, and that's something I see a lot on LinkedIn, and that also drives me a bit crazy, is that a lot of people have the feeling that their experience applies to everyone else. But that's not true, because everyone is different. So for instance, you give this example of the number of lab meetings or the frequency of lab meetings. So some people will be really fine if they have a lab meeting every 3 months, because they're just like, I like that, leave me alone, I do my job. And then if I need something, I can ring the bell if needed. But then 3 months, that's good. But then some other will panic, because it's just like, no, I need like some more support. And then they will be happy with the every 3 days meetings, which would drive me crazy. But maybe they like that because they like a bit more to be micromanaged, or to be like taken care of on a regular basis. And I think that's something also that is really important to highlight, is that whatever people say, that they say this is good or bad, there's like no like real theory, science that says like this is good or bad for you, because you are the only one who knows what is good or bad for you. So you need to like find the information as much as you can using what you said, and then translate this information into what do you want, what is needed for you, in which environment do you think you're gonna strive or die. Like this is really something like make it for you. Like don't listen to your colleagues who say like, no, but you know, like this guy is super nice because you have meetings every 3 months. If you think like, no, my God, 3 months is not enough, I want something a bit more frequent. You know, this is really something like to everyone listening to that, like really make it for you, because you're the one who has to go through that.
Crucial. And I think that, of course, starts with understanding what you want and what are your needs. And maybe if someone has more experience, maybe they did a couple of research projects, so they can kind of understand, I like this environment, I don't like this environment, so they can understand their needs better for a PhD. How would you advise someone who doesn't have so much experience and they don't even know what is a toxic lab? I mean, labs are just labs, right? It's just a bunch of people working together. How would you advise someone to understand their needs if they didn't have so much experience? What kind of questions they should ask to themselves before making selection criteria?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think many of what I'm saying right now, for instance, and what I'm saying to PhD students is stuff that I realized afterwards, of course, not like beforehand that I thought like, oh, this is what I need. No, it's like experience is also bringing you information. I think that so many people who want to do a PhD, usually they had already research experience by being in a lab at some point, for instance, a master's internship or bachelor internship. And I think already they can ask themselves questions like make a simple list of what did I like during this experience and what I didn't like, or where were my needs not fulfilled. And I think that's a difficult exercise to do when you don't know exactly your needs, which is fine, because that's the way you're supposed to discover that. But I think, past experience is very likely the only way where you can see what you like. How when you feel good, I would really like make that a feeling. So I'm someone who works a lot with feeling, which is always weird for scientists. But for me, it's really like if I feel good, it means like, okay, that's for me. And if I feel a bit like, oh, like, oh, no, it means there's something that is not like matching with what I need. And I think that's what I would advise, like master students or aspiring prospective PhD student, that they think of their past experience in a lab or in an environment where they did an internship, or even like practical labs that they had during their studies, for instance, for biologists, and that they think, what did I like? Like, did I like when I had a project where we were like 10 working together? Or I didn't like it because 10 is a bit too much and I'm a bit more introvert, so I prefer like one-on-one or maybe a small group of 3. Then, for instance, if you say, oh, I prefer a small group of 3, then I would not seek a position in a lab where the group is like 200 people, because it's probably not going to fit your personality. So I think you can try to see like kind of micro pilot studies that happened in the past, and that you try to extrapolate that into how would that look like if I would have to spend 4 or 5 years with the same type of environment. Would I feel like, oh, that's something I can do? Or would that be a struggle? And I think if you think, oh, that would be a struggle, then it means that this is not the environment or the type of people or the topic or anything that would fit you.
Sometimes, no matter how good your selection criteria are and how well you understand your own needs, it happens that you, well, at least from the stories of people I know, they really paid attention to choose, but they still ended up in a toxic lab because maybe the interview was very nice, but then something different happens when you join the lab and when you actually see how it looks like day to day. So then I know many people who will be watching this now and thinking, yeah, I'm one of those in the toxic lab. How does one deal with that? Is it okay sometimes to think about leaving completely the whole PhD just because it's so mentally draining? And if I decide not to leave and stick with it and push through it, how do I deal with that then?
Yeah, so it's I'm gonna share something personal as well because that's what I'm always trying to do. And I think that may help the people who are listening to that and feel like in a similar position. So I also had at some point in my career where I was in a lab that didn't match my needs, let's say. And I tried because I thought on paper it looks really cool. But it was an environment that didn't fit me. And it took time. I think it really took months or even years to accept that. So I think it's really difficult first to accept. And I was not ready to take any decision. And we're not talking even about leaving your PhD. For me, it would be leaving a position and finding something else. But still, it was really hard to even imagine thinking about like taking this decision of leaving a position that on paper was perfect, that a lot of people wanted to have. That was too complex. So after weeks of basically every day being like crying on the floor at my place, thinking like this cannot go on like that. So what I did was to go to the company doctor, because I needed someone who was external, but yet in the institution. And the company doctor advised me to talk to a coach that they had, so that we could discuss that together, because I was in such a deep status that I couldn't myself come up with solutions to the questions that I had. And I knew that I would be fine at some point, but I knew I needed someone to pick me and help me going through this moment together for a couple of sessions, and then finding what do I actually need? What is the problem? Is there a way I can solve that by implementing something? And I think so that's what I did. And the first session, I remember like texting all my friends saying like, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be fine because there's someone that I will go to this person, but I even don't remember the frequency, but like in like a couple of weeks. And we're gonna go through that together, and it will evolve. And then eventually, so I left this position, which was a great decision for me. But it took months to reach this moment. And I think what I would like to say with that is that I think the best thing you can do if you feel like you're in this type of environment, whatever the stage of your PhD, if it's like the first 3 months, the last 3 months, in the middle, whatever, go talk to someone that you trust, that is independent, so that is not in the group if you can. So it can be, for instance, the company doctor, because you have access to the company doctor if you have a contract with the university or the host institute. It can be a professor or a assistant professor, postdoc, someone from a different group that you see, and that maybe you can just talk to them via email saying like, you look like someone that I could share that with. Can you please like have a coffee with me, because I would like to speak about that. You have also all these persons at the university. You always have someone you can go to, that you can really share everything that you have, and that will stay confidential, and they will help you finding solutions. So maybe they're not the best people to help you finding this solution, but then they will say, go to this person who can help you finding a solution. And then one solution, so I fully feel what you're saying, leaving a PhD. That's like, it's like, I can imagine those who are thinking that and those who did that. It's a big decision. It's a very tough decision, because I can imagine that it feels like a failure, even though it's not. But if this is the best thing that can happen to you, yeah, do it. Do it. Discuss that with others. Discuss that also with people who know you, and try to look, which is very difficult, because when you're feeling like really bad, you don't see any future, so that's difficult to think about that. But I think if you leave something aside, it also means that you have new opportunities, and then maybe, very likely, the new opportunities will be better than a PhD. And it could be maybe a different PhD in a different institute. Great. It could be maybe no PhD, but then you start a career somewhere else that fits better your needs. Great as well. So try, but again, I'm saying that, and I realize it's really difficult to imagine that when you're in this situation, but try to see what kind of opportunities it would bring if you leave one aspect of your life, the PhD. Where will you end up? Like, what is happening. And for that, I think you need the help of people, or you need, I don't know, but that can really help to get the support of people.
So sometimes all it takes, I think, for getting some clarity and making big decisions is for someone who, as you said, is independent of what you're doing and is not involved. Someone who can just take it from a different perspective, who can listen to you and just tell you, yeah, you're not crazy. That is a toxic lab. Definitely, I would not like that to be happening to me. And then as you talk, you kind of understand more and more as you untangle whatever is inside you. So I think that's a really important point. On the continuing note of the mental health during PhD, another big problem is getting overwhelmed with never-ending, ever-growing to-do lists of experiments, of things you have to do or that you would like to do, but then you have to prioritize because experiments take a long time and so on. How does one stay organized? That's the one advice I would selfishly ask you to advise me. How do you stay organized as a scientist on a practical
like
day-to-day
asking for
level?
a friend. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to be a friend to myself.
I do. Oh, it's well, one of my biggest struggle in academia is to manage this workload or the work-life balance, which I'm still trying to manage. So I'm not sure I have answers like that work. I think what I realized, and I see that also with many students and PhD students and myself as well, is that the way we plan, of course, we need to plan, otherwise it's not going to work. But the way we plan things, we usually don't plan long enough. So for instance, if you think like, oh, this experiment is going to take me 1 month, no, it's for sure going to take you 2 months, like double it or plus 1.5. Usually they say plus 30%. And I think for experiments, I would say like really plus 100%, like really double the amount of time that you allocate to experiments, because you never know what can go wrong, but things would go wrong. And I think, for instance, also what I see is, let's assume, have you already published some manuscript during your PhD?
No. I just started in September. I am a co-author on one part of a PhD thesis of another student, but nothing of my own yet.
So let's assume that when it's going to be your own PhD. That's already your own PhD, your own manuscript based on your own experiments. How long do you think it's going to take between the moment you write the first sentence, let's say the title, or the first sentence of the introduction, or the material method, until the moment that it's published, saying published?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I have a perspective on this because I've seen people publish, and I know sometimes this back and forth from submission to peer reviewers giving you back comments to forcing you to do basically another paper of experiments that can last up to 2-3 years sometimes if you're really being stubborn. But I would hope from the moment I start writing, it would all be finished within a year. That would be kind of nice.
Yeah, I think you're so plus make it plus 100%.
yeah.
No, but so for instance, what you say is correct, and we can discuss again in a couple of years. How long did it take for your first paper? But for instance, when you write a paper, what a lot of people and also students, when they write a report in their during their internship, what they don't realize is that they depend on others. And when you write a paper, you depend on your supervisor, and your supervisor is the one who gets like 400 emails per day in their inbox and have a pile already of 15 other manuscripts that they have to go through. And you will need to wait. And this is extremely frustrating because you have the feeling like, why are they drinking a coffee right now and talking to a colleague? And why aren't they working on my manuscript that I sent 6 months ago and you still haven't heard from them? And these are things that will take so much time that it is also time that is difficult to plan because it's not in your hands. And I think that's what is difficult also when you're a PhD student, is that you need already to be good at planning your own things and be organized, but this is also very influenced by other people, and especially your supervisor, and especially when they come and ask you something like, oh, by the way, I have to send an abstract for this conference like in 2 days, can you please prepare that for me? And then you're like, no because it doesn't fit my calendar, but of course you will say yes because not a lot of people dare to say no. So yeah, stay organized. I think planning is definitely something very important, and try to, if you're like you at the beginning of your PhD, I would ask my colleagues who are in the third or fourth year of the PhD, where did they lose time, or where did tasks take longer than what they expected, so that you can also take that into account in your own planning. Because of course it's also dependent on the environment, on, for instance, how fast your supervisor is going to give you feedback, this kind of things. And that's information. I think knowledge is always power. So if you know that, you can also organize that a bit better, and then get less frustrated if things don't go as fast as you expected or as you planned. So I think really talk to people to get a better overview of what's happening around you. And the second one is try to say no. But I'm still learning this one, so I'm not sure that I can like give advice on that. I think that's also like PhD students feel like they have to say yes to everything, especially when the supervisor asks, oh, can you supervise also these students, or can you send me an abstract or whatever, they will. I think I see that it's challenging for them to, and it was challenging for me to say no, because they don't want to say no. They even don't think that they are allowed to say no. And I think that's something that I would advise everyone to reflect on it and think like, oh, by the way, can I say no? Am I allowed to say no to tasks? And then if I would be allowed to say no to tasks, which you are, what type of task do I have the feeling that I feel like I do them, but I don't really understand why I'm doing them, or I don't get any joy out of them? Then I would try to say no to them to get a bit of space for that, I would say.
To bring back the conversation to NextMinds, how do you work with students? How do you organize this company? I would like to know more about it. Do you have courses in NextMinds, or do you work individually with students? How does it all function?
So I have three, let's say, lines that I'm going to develop in the coming years. So the first one is, let's start with the one that I'm busy with. So I would like to have digital courses. So basically courses for prospective PhD students and PhD students, and probably postdoc and everything that I would like to, everyone that I would like to help. So these courses, as we speak, are about to be live in an app. So I have developed a NextMinds app. Of course, developing an app is not my skills, let's say, so it took a bit longer than I thought it would take. Like always, planning didn't plan well. So yeah, there will be online courses with videos and slides and everything that can help to get a position, to find the best PhD position, and all of that. So that's gonna happen in the coming days/weeks. So really, as we speak. The second aspect is that I will give workshops, mostly at universities, so on-site workshops. So the aim is basically to be paid by the university so that they hire me so that I can give workshops to a lot of PhD students on the similar aspects. So friends, everything that we discussed right now, so that I turn that into a workshop, so that PhD students also don't have to pay anything, but they just rely on their institute for that. I will start on-site, but I see, and also during conferences, but I think that is also going to get online at some point. And the last aspect is that I'm now following this year until June training to become a certified coach and counselor, so that then I can start also have one-on-one sessions with PhD students. The aim is also to have that online. So then it's going to be really like one-on-one sessions, let's say 5, 6, 7 sessions, to help them really, for instance, if they are in the toxic lab or these kind of things, that we can go through that together. And since I already, of course, I know the field of academia, but I also wanted to have the skills of like to be allowed to call myself a coach, So that's not yet. I'm still, hopefully I would get the exam and the certificate, and then I will start doing that in September. So that's a bit the three aspects.
You can be that external person then for somebody to go through their major decisions. That's amazing. Isabelle, I am aware that you are still recovering from the long COVID consequences, so I do not want to keep you too long. I'm very grateful for your time and all of the insights from this conversation. Where can people find you, and how can they reach out, and where can they find your company?
So you have right now two options. So I'm, as you said, very active on LinkedIn, where you actually have three options. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on my own personal account, which is at the real Isabelle Kohler, because it's me, right? You can also find the page of NextMinds on LinkedIn as well. So it is at NextMinds. And you can go on the website, which is www.nextminds.net. And very soon, the app is going to be live for Apple and Android users. And this is something that I'm going to also advertise via the website. And you can, you can sign up for the newsletter as you, if you want. So it's a newsletter that comes every second week, and you can sign up directly on the website, nextmind.net.
Awesome. There will be links to your company, your profile, and everything wherever you, the watcher, are watching this. Is it YouTube or newsletter? So feel free to check out NextMinds and Isabelle Kohler and all of her cool content that she's posting on her LinkedIn and elsewhere. I think it's quite cool that you have an app. That's awesome. That's quite new in this field. So it's awesome. I wish you all the luck, Isabelle. Thank you so much for the conversation, and I hope we can do this one more time when I, get back to you with some more questions or some more experience that's relevant.
With pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right.